It's a brand new day and it's time to do business. Good morning. Welcome to 55 minutes of current and relevant business conversations right here on Channels Television. The program is Business Morning and I'm Ini John McQuan. We start as we would normally do from the global oil space. Prices dipped around 1% today, reversing the previous session's gains and were poised for a monthly decline, with investors eyeing potential US-Iran talks in Doha amid a strained interim ceasefire in the 4-month-old war. So let's look at the numbers at this time. We're still in the red. $72.39 a barrel. Brent has lost more than 1%. WTI almost 1% down, 0.82%. $70.19 a barrel. Well, the more actively traded September contracts we saw lost even less than that, 0.6% is what we have for those numbers. And of course, fingers are crossed as to how the talks will go in Doha. We've seen two different attempts at having a lasting peace, but it seems not to be holding. Well, investors are also pricing in hopes of a positive outcome from the talks in Doha now, even though real normalization of flows through the Strait of Hormuz is not yet visible. And coming to Nigeria, households across parts of the country are beginning to experience relief as retail prices of liquefied petroleum gas, that's the cooking gas, decline following improved product supply and softer depot prices. The latest market update from gas marketers shows that retail LPG prices have started easing in major cities after weeks of elevated prices, although the reductions have not been uniform because of varying transportation costs, distance from supply, depot, and retailer margins. Checks by marketers indicates that cooking gas is now selling for between 1,100 and 1,350 naira for a kilogram in Lagos, Ibadan, and Abeokuta, that's Ogun State, while consumers in Benin City, Port Harcourt, River State, and Warren Delta State are paying between 1,150 naira and 1,400 naira for a kilogram. The development is expected to reduce the cost burden on households and businesses that rely on liquefied petroleum gas for cooking and other daily activities. The stakeholders, however, say that sustaining the downward trend will depend on consistent supply and stable market conditions. And let's see how the market closed yesterday. We're still in the negative, lost more than 1.5%. Unfortunately, 1.57% is what the oil share dropped at 228,401.92. Market cap is at 146.564 trillion naira at the close of trade. Volume, value, and deals were green at the close of trade, but of course that doesn't mean that the market was positive. Top gainers were UPDC, CNF, and Sovereign Insurance, while top losers had MTN. MTN was the one, lost about 83 naira yesterday. That's 10%, the max that it could lose. Learn Africa also lost 10%, Unilever also, and those were the major downers in the market at the close of trade. Top traders were Ikeja Hotel, Access Core, and Sterling Nigeria. And outstanding consumer credits in Nigeria fell by 780 billion naira in 1 month to 3.03 trillion naira in February 2026, as high borrowing costs continues to weigh on household demand for loans despite improving macroeconomic conditions. The decline was contained in the Central Bank of Nigeria's February 2026 economic report, which showed that consumer credit dropped from 3.81 trillion naira in January to 3.03 trillion in February, driven by reductions in both personal and retail loans. The report, however, indicates that credit to the broader economy continues to expand during the period in review. According to the CBN, total credit to the economy increased by 0.8% to 57.88 trillion naira at the end of February, from 57.41 trillion naira in the preceding month, mirroring the gradual improvement in monetary conditions. Well, the Lagos State Waste Management Authority, LOMA, has intensified efforts to eliminate illegal waste disposal across the state and also strengthen enforcement operations in addressing the recurring environmental concern. The managing director of LOMA, Mr. Muiwa Gadeshein, made this known while carrying out a cleanup exercise in the Apapa area of the state. In the last 4 weeks, it's become increasingly difficult to move around Lagos State without seeing heaps of refuse along the roads and in public spaces. Some residents have completely turned deaf ears to environmental laws. Instead of paying their waste bill, they resort to dumping their refuse along the road, defacing the metropolis. The growing menace has prompted officials of the Lagos State Waste Management Authority to assess some of the affected areas, moving around Mobile Road in Apapa, one of the most challenged waste corridors.
Our health is at risk, I'm telling you, because recently it is not like this, but suddenly, I think it started last 2 months, we start seeing and witnessing the waste in precarious states. Because we know formally it's not like this. When people dump the waste, say maybe within 2-3 days, they have come to dispose it. But suddenly, we start seeing heap of waste.
Community leaders in Apapa and PSP operators are concerned about the illegal dumping of refuse by traders and residents of informal settlements, utilizing spaces beneath the marine bridge for their daily economic activities.
One of the challenges that we have here is the economic migrants who are largely staying around here. Most of under the bridge, you find a lot of them. Some of them come from Apapa, which is on the other side. They come here, they push their carts because they used to dump on the medium before, but we have pushed them away from the medium to expect people to patronize the PSP. Mostly they come from that side, they come here and dump the waste.
We suggest that it will require some kind of enforcement. Somebody who other police here, so that this thing will not be happening. If that could be done, it will reduce it.
If your environment is clean, you have good health. If you don't, you're always sick every day. But a lot of people don't look at it that way. So far as long as the dirt is not in their house, they're ready to throw it on the road.
It's the same scenario at Kofo Abayomi roundabout, where LOMA officials are clearing accumulated refuse along that road. Corporate and government facilities occupying Warehouse Road, Apapa, are also affected by indiscriminate waste disposal.
Lagos State has to do something on these things. Our office is smelling inside. No matter how you fleet, how you put whatever air freshener, what is smelling because of this place. We are ready to cooperate. But the problem is, even if you put a night guy, is at his own risk.
The managing director of LOMA calls for strong partnership from the private sector and also encourages residents to embrace waste sorting as a means of generating additional income.
Please pay your waste bills. The PSP cannot work if you're not paying the waste bill. We started cleaning up statewide in more than 57 routes, 3,000 black spots. You'll see a cleaner state within the next 7 days or so. However, the medium-term solution is source your waste. The plastic, the paper and cardboard, the aluminum can, the glass, keep it separate.
The Lagos State government says more refuse dump sites will be opened in the coming days to make waste disposal easier for the PSP operators. Government is also warning that anyone found disposing waste indiscriminately will be prosecuted. Well, we've not been having as clean Lagos as we used to, and of course it's a challenge to everyone. Health is affected, could be affected, some are already affected. If something is not done, it could spread among others, and not to mention that this is wasted resources in this waste. Well, let's speak this, the $400 million trash problem of Lagos. With Mr. Bimbola Agbenjo. He is the ESG business manager at IPMC. Mr. Agbenjo, good morning. Welcome to the program.
Good morning. Good morning.
Great. So you call it.
Thank you for having us.
Great. In an article that you shared, you call this a $400 million trash problem. I believe you're referring to Lagos.
Yes.
How do
that headline speaks to the current waste situation in Lagos, and it's putting a data-backed lens to the current waste management issue in Lagos. If we start to speak about the waste management issue in Lagos, everybody knows what the problems are. The infrastructure is being overstretched, and the government hasn't invested enough in changing or upgrading this infrastructure. So that is how that headline and that figure was brought about.
Okay, but when you say government has not upgraded and all that, just a couple of years down the line, Lagos used to be really, really neat. We had a system then. Is it the change in the system that has brought the waste back? Have we had more people in Lagos? Or is it a change in attitude? What exactly would you connect to this change of we are discussing waste management again in Lagos? It's supposed to be a phase we have gone away from, or we have outgrown.
Okay, thank you very much for that question. So it's a bit of the three things you mentioned. But one particular factor that we have to point out is that the waste infrastructure system in Lagos needs to be expanded. I would give an analogy with the transport system. The transport system for the longest time in Lagos had buses. But in today's Lagos State, we have realized that buses are not just enough for Lagos State. The state has invested in trains. The state has currently invested in waterway transportation. This is similar to the waste management issue. For a very, very long time, Lagos has operated a linear waste infrastructure model where the waste is just collected and is going to be dumped at a landfill or at a dump site. That model no longer works for the size of Lagos. Lagos is currently overwhelmed with the amount and size of waste that even just collecting and going to dispose is a problem. And we are seeing that that infrastructure is breaking down and now requires a circular model infrastructure where the waste is sorted from the source, where recyclable materials are taken out from the source, and in a way where you have a circular system where organic wastes and technologies like biogas and bio-waste systems are in use, and not just in form of MOUs or PPPs, but we are advocating that the states now take the lead in financing this infrastructure. Waste ties directly to the health of citizens. If the state does not take the lead role and the state is waiting for private sector to take the lead role, we will remain on the same spot for a very, very long time.
Well, Mr. Benjo, I believe that Lagos and the government do know about this challenge, and that Lagos cannot continue to operate in a linear structure when it comes to waste management. And that's why you have the Ministry of Circular Economy. Or don't you think, or perhaps is it too early to expect to feel the impact of this ministry, because they are supposed to fill in the gap when it comes to waste management and divert some of this waste into resources?
Yes, there is a ministry, and yes, you're seeing a lot of activity from the state officials and from the state government, but it boils down to the financing mechanisms behind these policies. You're seeing a state that is mouthing circular economy drives and circular economy initiatives, but is not financing them to the scale at which they should be financed. Yes, we are seeing pilot technologies. For example, I will speak about the Kosi biogas system, but Kosi is just one market. Can we calculate how many markets that need that kind of system that are in Lagos? And the state is championing just one market having a biogas system. So you're seeing a disparity in the scale of investments in infrastructure, and that is what is currently causing the breakdown. In terms of policy, the state is pushing out a lot of policy. It has banned single-use plastics. It is putting in a lot of extended producer responsibilities. But when it comes to financing this infrastructure to the scale at which it should be financed, we are seeing a very, very stark contrast. I will give you a figure that will baffle you, Ma. So in 2024, based on Lagos State's audited financial reports, Loma spent about 23 billion naira on managing waste, and about 95% of that went into operational costs. That means the running of trucks, that means the paying of personnel, and you're not really seeing the state invest in capital infrastructure. Where is the investment in recycling centers? Where is the investment in material recovery facilities? So you're not seeing that capex investment by the state, but you're seeing a lot of operational investments. And even recently, as at last week, Saturday, we saw His Excellency Babajide Sanwo-Olu come out and also participate in this waste, clearing out waste from the streets. But we will continue to have those situations if the state does not start to invest properly in the waste infrastructure and not just pushing out policies.
But would you say that the financing should be solely from the government? What about the private sector? Are these not business opportunities for the private sector to key into? Hello, Mr. Genjo. I wonder, can you hear me?
Yes,
okay,
I can hear you. So the private sector participation in waste management, currently, maybe I should just give an explanation of, there is current private sector participation in waste management. The waste that is collected from household and commercial premises is done by private sector participants. They are generally called PSPs. But these PSPs are in a state of dire because they are surrounded by infrastructures that are not working. And I'll give you an example. For example, a private sector participant that is servicing a residential area and has collected the waste. When this private sector participant's truck goes to the landfill, it takes days for them to offload the waste they've collected. So that leads to a breakdown in the infrastructure, and that is what you're currently seeing in communities and in areas where there are complaints about, oh, we don't see the trucks as frequently as they should see. These trucks are spending days trying to offload the waste that they've collected already. And that is a fault of the government by not investing properly in the landfill. You only have about 2 or 3 landfills, and from the last interview by the Honorable Commissioner of Environment, Lagos State is even dumping its waste in a neighboring state, which is Ogun State. Lagos is borrowing Ogun State's landfill, one of the landfills, to dump its waste. So you're seeing that the current system cannot hold. And while there's private sector participation, the infrastructure around this private sector participation is still heavily dependent on the state government. So which is why the financing still comes to bear. I hope that explains it, ma'am.
Yeah, thank you for that. But don't you think that perhaps the attitude of Lagosians, Nigerians, in managing waste also has a contribution to this? I mean, we saw there where people are dumping their waste at, on the roads and all of that. People have the heart to bring their waste from their homes, and actually dump in water, dump on the waste side. I mean, isn't that a problem also?
Yes, that is a very, very huge challenge. And also, it's funny enough that still sits with the government and the people. There is a huge need for advocacy and also penalties. If you look at Loma's books and the amount that Loma has spent in terms of enforcement of the environmental rules and environmental laws in Lagos State, you will see that there is a lot to be desired. In terms of enforcement of these rules, people abide the rules when they see stringent enforcement. So, for example, when these penalties around dumping waste are heavily enforced, you will see that there will be a drastic reduction in this kind of activities. But also, you also need to factor in that the infrastructure to collect this waste is not just there. You're looking at communities that have collected their waste, and even from this previous environmental sanitation that happened on Saturday, there are still complaints that, okay, yes, we've done the environmental sanitation, but where are the trucks to cart away this waste? So you're seeing that it's not a one-size-fits-all. There are different sides to the problem, but the state has to take a lead in addressing this waste issue and waste infrastructure breakdown.
Yeah, and I got really excited a couple of years ago when they talked about generating electricity from the waste, especially the one at Olushosun, and we are yet to see all of that. So you can imagine if this waste that are also resources are put into very effective use, some of our problems, infrastructural problems, would actually have been solved.
I 100% agree with you, ma'am. And I think a few months ago when I was on the show, we also still mentioned that similar project.
Yeah.
And we are all still waiting for the state.
We saw the master plan. We saw it, It was shown to us.
It speaks to what I'm talking about. That project is being privately handled. It is privately financed. The state is not financing that project. So you really can't hold anybody responsible. The state is just concessioning the landfill to that company and expecting the company to look for the financing to carry this out. So while we wait for it, I am advocating, and we are advocating, that the state should take a lead in financing this infrastructure and not just wait for private sector to come and put in private sector money. The state actually needs to finance the infrastructure.
All right, thank you so much for your time. We hope it's still above 1,000 for a kg, but it's better than when we had 2,000 just, I think last week. We're still struggling with high prices, and the week before that. And we're told that since last week we've been having supplies into the country, into Lagos State and some of those major cities, and that is the reason that the price has been reducing. However, on the other side, the government has warned petroleum products marketers to reduce prices. But of course, you know that it's a deregulated environment when we talk about petroleum products, so the government cannot enforce legally reduction in prices one way or the other. It's people's businesses, and they have the right in this environment to choose how they sell it, demand and supply. That's the environment we're running. That's what the law says, since it's been deregulated. And but we know that the global price of oil has gone down. Yes, we're talking about more than $100 for Brent. Now we're talking about $72. We've seen the price continue to drop. How long does it take for a drop in the price of global crude to translate into petrol at the pump? If it was an increase, we would not have to have this conversation, because we'd already feel the price and see it even before now. Let's talk to Dumebi. Dumebi Oluwole is the research manager, financial derivatives company, joins us from London. Dumebi, how much is gas there? This is a global problem. The Strait of Hormuz is affecting everybody from the UK to the US, of course, to Nigeria. Has it reduced there?
Well, just slightly. I use the bus system and the train system, so I would say I'm kind of immune to Yeah, but I think right now we're actually seeing prices subtly, soften, especially supermarket prices for some commodities like eggs, milk. They're beginning to, soften from what we were experiencing before. Energy prices are just relatively stagnant. We haven't seen such a drastic change. And in terms of LNG, because this is the summertime, so heaters are off, there's less demand.
Yeah. So back here in Nigeria, we're beginning to get a little bit of relief. But when it comes to petrol, even the government has had to complain that the rate of reduction doesn't match the reduction in the price of global oil. Perhaps, what's that thing? They call it the lag between the policy to the reality.
I think you're very spot on that. That's exactly the first thing I was going to lead with, which is the lag. But I guess it's also important that we, contextualize what exactly is happening and why it is happening the way it is happening. So the first thing is looking at, let's start with LNG prices, right? So we've seen natural gas prices significantly fall, and the major reason for that is less demand for heating. So across Europe, the UK, and to some extent in some Asian countries, we're seeing like a heat wave, right? As of a few days ago, last week specifically, schools were not opening, offices were saying everyone could just decide to work from home simply because of how hot it was, right? So the fact that there is no demand for for heating is of course reducing demand globally for LNG, and that in itself is affecting prices. With the LNG prices falling, that's one of the reasons why we're now seeing cooking gas, prices also fall. So it's that straight or direct market link between what's happening globally, the increase in supply in Nigeria, because now naira is stable, plus the fact that global prices are falling. That's clearly supporting LPG prices cooking gas prices in Nigeria, and the expectation on that level is that the trend will likely continue, especially as summer period continues. Over the next couple of weeks, there's still expectation of a very hot weather, especially in July. So we could still see LNG prices fall further. But as we head into September, where the weather would likely get colder and heating demand begins to pick up, we might see LPG prices also increase in tandem. Now, speaking to petrol prices, the biggest factor I would say that's happening here is uncertainty. So the first thing is the memorandum of understanding between the US and Iran hasn't necessarily equated to an agreement from both parties. And just yesterday, there were still issues around strikes from both parties within the Strait of Hormuz, right? So that uncertainty is what the market is pricing in. And that's why we're not seeing petrol prices fall as quickly as we saw, crude oil prices fall. In fact, there are reports that are saying that it's almost like the market was trigger happy, and that's why we saw Brent prices fall significantly, right, from about 120 barrels that it was, when the war started, to about $72 per barrel that we're discussing today. So the trigger happiness in the markets is beginning to subside, because it seems like everyone is now being realistic on the fact that the uncertainty of the war, whether it's going to stop or not, is now the question that we're all asking ourselves today. And so that uncertainty in answering whether yes or no, because the markets right now is saying I don't know, that's exactly why we're seeing this situation happen. And we're of course seeing it in the Nigerian market as well. Beyond the FG even complaining about the fact that prices haven't fallen as much, President Trump as well also said the same thing a few days ago. So it's not just a Nigeria specific issue, it's a global issue. And I think this will actually persist in the near term.
Yeah, and Dumebi, have we heard anything about the Doha talks? Any sentiment from there? We're just waiting blindly until the major parties decide to spill something from there.
Honestly speaking, I think everyone is, applying a wait-and-see approach at this point, because again, like I said, the markets were trigger happy. Even I myself, I came here and I said that, with the memorandum of understanding and Pakistan being involved, with the green lights that we're seeing, the expectation is that prices will fall further and we should see that replicate in the market. But unfortunately, a few days after I said that, strikes happened again. So the markets are now, of course, becoming more sensitive around uncertainty, which is I will say, which has become the way of the world right now, especially when you consider the US-Iran situation. Uncertainty really is where we all are. And unfortunately, there's no easy way to measure uncertainty, and so the markets are just moving as the news come out. So right now, in terms of the Doha talks, everyone is just waiting for, everyone to say something, or at least one person to say something.
One person say something, depending on who. But I guess that is why the marketers are not in a hurry to reduce their price so much. Although this morning I did notice there's a little bit of reduction in some of the petrol stations on my way. I believe here in Lagos, about 1,100. I think that's what I saw, away from 1,200. But even with all of the FCCPC, they had shared their warning and concerns, the federal government now, people are like, let's see really what happens in Doha. If there will not be another meeting, this is like the third one that we're having. If something concrete will come out of it. But mine is to maybe, if it was an increase, they'll be fast to increase, and they won't wait to see if perhaps it's a temporal strike or temporal problem.
You're not wrong there, and I think it's the uniqueness of a developing market like Nigeria, where we see that prices are very quick to rise and very slow to fall. So that downward stickiness, I would say, is the reason why FCCPC is saying what they're saying, because at this point they of course have to consider consumer protection and how this uncertain moves with the marketers and other retailers, how it is ideally affecting the broader consumer market in Nigeria. Where I think what I think about the situation is that there has to be more conversations with the stakeholders, and an understanding of the business priorities and the consumer base is extremely important, so that there's enough balance. Because issuing out a statement, in my opinion, I don't necessarily think it moves the needle. What I think it does is that it, of course, rattles the market even more and raises questions about the policy that we have made and the reforms that we have made in deregulating the market. And that in itself could come back to bite us when you look at investor confidence and how easy it will be investing in the downstream petroleum sector in Nigeria. And I don't think that we want to restart those conversations following the success of the Dangote refinery. So I think that there has to be more conversations at stakeholder level, and what we should ideally be seeing is a consensus from both parties on an issued statement regarding how best to proceed. And I think this also speaks broadly to the issues around communication and transparency with the public, and not just with FCCPC now, but across all ministry development and agencies, simply because this lack, or I would say the slow ride towards that level of transparency around institutional understanding, around sensitizing people, and actually using plain English to just really explain what exactly is going on is still significantly lacking. And this is one of the reasons why we tend to see panic buying a lot of times, tend to see a lot of shocks, within Nigeria's consumer market. And it doesn't mean that they're wrong for issuing this statement or wrong for actually raising the issues, because when you even look at the numbers, you see that petrol prices in Nigeria increased about 49% following the increase in global oil prices, which was around 60%. But petrol prices are falling about 39% globally, but in Nigeria it has only fallen about between 14 to 20% across different markets. So you see where the gap is coming from. But in my opinion, I think the consolidation should be between the stakeholders, and what the public should be hearing is a synchronized assessment of what exactly is going on, and an issued statement to continually ensure that the public is, that there's no tension, in the public space.
But I mean, whatever way we want to look at it, it all feeds back to the price of commodities. The essentials remain high or keep increasing, even if it's at a slower rate. But we see prices increasing, and of course, that's squeezing purchasing power of households.
Yes, you're very right there. And I think beyond the issue around petrol prices or energy prices, I think it's also important that we isolate the various issues that are leading to these problems problems of significant increase in other commodity prices. Petrol price is just one of the factors driving this issue. In my opinion, the biggest issue today is insecurity. You cannot produce small and expect to sell big. It doesn't work that way, right? And our local farmers, our primary producers are finding it very difficult to produce and sell, right? So the issue around, domestic production is extremely, extremely intricate. And in fact, I will say that is the biggest problem that the inflation story or commodity story in Nigeria faces today. And until we get that right, I don't think that there will be a point where the increase in petrol prices or we see the naira, depreciating today. I don't think that those issues will surmount that at least in the near term, simply because the food production story starts from the farms, and unfortunately we're having issues there, significant issues there. Farmers are losing at least 50% of their harvest, or they're not able to replant, right? So it's a very, very big issue. So directly from the farms, prices have already increased by over 50%. Before you now think of adding petrol prices or logistics cost or the impact of the naira, which in itself has even been muted over the last couple of months, right? So I think the inflation story today, in my opinion, really, really starts from the farms. And I think that until we get that right, the conversation and issues around consumer protection, inflation, I think we will still largely have those problems. And the antidote, in my opinion, apart from solving the issues from the farms, is when we look at the broader, needs of man, addressing issues around food, addressing issues around shelter, addressing issues around even water and safety, until the federal government spends time to just simplify whatever model it is towards these core issues of man, and then decide to start addressing the biggest issues across those 5 key things. I think that, again, these conversations will continue to happen.
All right, Dumebi. Well, we'll continue to have the conversations and hope that one day it will become reality, solution, and then we would enjoy it. Thank you so much, Dumebi Oluwole, joining us from London.
Thank you for having me.
All right, let's take a break now. We'll stay in the UK, one way or the other. But we'll take a break now. When we come back, we have another conversation that will be from Nigeria but connected to the United Kingdom. Please stay with us. Welcome back. You're still watching Business Morning right here on Channels Television. Now let's maybe look a little bit at about politics in the United Kingdom. And Nigerians are a huge part of it. We have joining us this morning the legal advisor of Central Association of Nigerians in the UK, Mr. Odianoso Matthew, right here in the studio. Mr. Matthew, good morning and welcome to the program.
Good morning.
Yeah.
Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, so I know that Nigerians are everywhere. We're large in the UK also. The community there is large. But of course, we are still larger back home. And sometimes when we hear what's going on, the Labour Party and all of that, how does it concern us?
Well, thank you for that question. Yes, as you know, Nigerians, we're like social beings, so we move everywhere. So as they always say, if you go to somewhere you don't find a Nigerian, please dust your feet and take a run. So yes, Nigerians we have a lot of diaspora Nigerians who reside, either work or study in the UK or live there in the UK. So obviously, because of overtime and the close relationship between the United Kingdom and Nigeria, and because it's an English-speaking country, you definitely will find more Nigerians gravitating towards countries like that and the US than other countries. Of course, we are still in other places, but you find that, especially also because of the quality of education that we do, receive in the UK, that standard type of education where you know that once you get into uni to do a study, you will be out at a certain time. There's no delay or strikes. So all those factors, apart from obviously the economic aspect, where because the sterling pound, pound sterling is strong, so people will naturally gravitate towards those climes. So a lot of opportunities have arisen, in how laws are being made. Unlike in the past, you find that the way laws are being made now, they're not considering the ethnic minority, including them, incorporating their needs, because we now have a growing population of ethnic minorities, and Nigerians seem to stand, one of the top countries where you can say is a source of migration.
Well, the most vocal Nigerian there, if she would still claim to be Nigerian, Kemi Bednock, she's very anti-Nigerian, and now I know that when the Prime Minister resigned, there were a lot of stones thrown at our own president to say, can we learn from that? Can anybody who the people says, we do not want you, we're not comfortable with you anymore, can the person resign? And those are some of the conversations that we had back here in Nigeria.
Yeah, a lot of conversations, but you will understand that Nigeria, like I said in one of my previous interviews, has a unique political system. So also the UK, its own political system is quite unique on its own. So
we should not expect our leaders to resign just because we don't want them.
No, because you can't compare apple with orange. They will always not be the same. No matter if the shape looks almost, they will never be the same. So UK's politics is far advanced without having to diminish how our own democracy is growing. But I'm not going to join words with her. She's there to hold whoever is in power accountable. That's her job. She's meant to be doing that. If she's not doing that, then she should not be there in the first place. So if she's holding them to power, which is good. Unfortunately, there's a lot of politicking also that goes on in the political space. So and it's not just that the people have rejected the Prime Minister per se. The party is the one that is having that challenge, because it's more of a party system. So whereby the party, the policies they brought in are beginning to bite, or the people the party members are not feeling carried along. There will be some kind of revolt, against whoever is their leader. And this is what has been playing out. So, and unfortunately for him, as a Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, appointed someone who ideally he should know or have a good background, but they appointed him as an ambassador to the US, and only for a lot of revelations coming up. And that was, for me, that was a straw that actually broke the camel's back. And from that point on, he could not recover. So it's not that the party hasn't been doing some good things. They brought in some new innovations, some new policies. Obviously, it will take time to mature, just like every other policy. Government.
All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Giannuso Matthew, the legal advisor to Central Association of Nigerians in the United Kingdom.
Thank you, too, for having me.
Yeah, and the MTN Foundation back home has been really busy looking for and getting ways to make impact. So it's not just about easing communication, but also touching lives.
The 26th of June every year has been set aside as the United Nations International Day Against Drug Abuse and Illicit Drug Trafficking, and the National Drug Law Enforcement Agency, in partnership with the MTN Foundation, is marking the day with this event. The President, who is represented by the Minister of Justice, reiterates his pledge to address the scourge.
We have elevated the fight against drug abuse to the platform of national security and public health priority. We recognize that sustainable development cannot be achieved while millions of our citizens remain trapped in the cycle of substance abuse. This is why we have mobilized all instruments of state power, from law enforcement to healthcare, from education to social services, in pursuit of this critical objective.
Key stakeholders speak on this year's theme, the world drug problem, persisting issues, new challenges, innovative responses.
We are no longer just fighting traditional narcotics. We are battling the rapid proliferation of synthetic drugs, the emergence of highly potent psychoactive substances, the weaponization of prescription medications, and the dark exploitation of cyberspace.
Our collaboration with the UNODC, particularly through the research, and our continued collaboration with the NDLEA reflects MTN's commitment to evidence-based collaborative strategies to prevent first-time substance use.
We just need, as a society, to respond in a very innovative way. That means doing things that are good in a very consistent, very effective, and very scalable manner.
The MTN Foundation and its partners speak on their motivation.
When to push the message about substance abuse into our secondary schools, our universities, just to make sure that the Nigerian youth has enough information.
You know, we work with those who are in rehab centers, and we see a lot of very, very harrowing cases. So that is why we're so happy with the indices that have been rolled out here and the successes being made on all fronts to combat drug abuse and illicit trafficking in the country. It's really heartwarming that all this is being done.
Stakeholders also called for more support for persons seeking rehabilitation. Dele Omoyeni, Channels Television News.
It's now time to go global, and we have Will Ibong.
Hi, it's a wet Tuesday here in Lagos, Nigeria, and we kick off with stocks that rallied in Monday's regular session in the U.S. after we saw that pause in hostilities between the U.S. and Iran, and that lifted investor sentiment. Now, on Sunday, the U.S. and Iran agreed to halt their attacks and allow commercial vessels to pass through the key Strait of Hormuz, the waterway that is very important. Now, here's Maria with the highlights of Monday's trading.
Closed on an upward swing on Monday as the Dow Jones was up at 0.59%, having a record-setting closing day, and the S&P 500 was also up at 1.16% up, and the heavy tech Nasdaq led the day at 2.07% up, as many investors were watching to see the U.S.-Iran deal, as it appears if Iran is coming closer to what the U.S. and Iran could come to a deal in less than 60 days. As if this deal comes to close sooner than expected, we could see some positive signs for the U.S. economy and for geopolitical climate, as investors still watching to see how this will pan out over the next few days and weeks ahead.
Thank you, Maria. We head now to Asia, where China's factory activity returned to expansion in June, supported by strong global demand for artificial intelligence-related products, including chips and computers. Official data showed the Manufacturing Purchasing Managers Index, or that's the PMI, rose to 50.3 from 50 points in May, and that's beating market expectations, and that's the reading above 50 signals. Now, despite the improvement, analysts say China's recovery remains uneven, with weak domestic demand, a prolonged property downturn, downturn and falling factory prices continuing to weigh on the world's second-largest economy. And the yen hit a 4-year decade low. Let's head to Japan now, where we've seen that falling to its weakest level against the US dollar since 1986, raising concerns that authorities could intervene again to support the currency. The yen slipped to around 162 to the dollar, extending its losses despite recent interest rate hikes by the Bank of Japan. Analysts say the currency remains under pressure as higher US interest rates continue to boost demand for the dollar. Now, still in Japan, Japan is raising visa fees and tripling its departure tax from today, marking the country's first visa fee increase in nearly 5 decades. The fee for a single entry visa has increased 5-fold to 15,000 yen, while multiple entry visa now costs 30,000 yen. The departure tax has also risen from 1,000 yen to 3,000 yen. The Japanese government says the increases reflect inflation and higher administrative costs, but insists the changes are unlikely to slow strong inbound tourism, which has been supported by the weak yen. Now, workers in Philippine capital are set to receive the biggest minimum wage increase on record as the government moves to cushion the impact of rising inflation. Authorities approved 85 peso daily wage increase for minimum wage earners in Metro Manila, lifting the daily minimum wage to 730 pesos. The adjustment takes effect in July and comes after inflation and higher living costs eroded household purchasing power. However, some labor groups argue the adjustment is still not enough to offset the rising cost of living. Now, in Singapore, we see households are facing record electricity bills as higher global energy prices linked to the Middle East conflict push up utility costs. Electricity tariffs are set to rise by 17% from July to September, while town gas prices will increase by 7.1%. The increases follow a sharp rise in wholesale natural gas prices after supply concerns triggered by the conflict in the Middle East. And that's
Thank you, Will. And as we head out of the studio, the NGX is in the red 0.03% at 228,329 points. 28. Lincolnshire Access Holding Nigerian Breweries, they have already experienced profit taking this morning, and I guess that will continue. Willie Bond will be back at 1:30 to give you updates from the markets and more. I'm Ini John McCrae, wishing you the best of the rest of the day.